All right. So we're on chapter 5, and today that's all we're doing. We're doing chapter 5. We're starting it, we're going through it, and we're finishing it. And with that, we finish the story of Deborah. So what we did until now is we discussed the story and what was going on. We went through more or less in order, chapter 4, but we went to chapter 5 when chapter 5 provided us with details or information that fills out the story in chapter 4, okay? But now I want to go through chapter 5 from a different perspective. Here, I don't want us to be looking for facts. We already gleaned all the facts from chapter 5, stuck them into chapter 4. We know what happened. We know the whole story. But as opposed to chapter 4 is told as an objective story, okay? It is, if you will, God telling the story. The totally objective, these are the facts, this is what happened. In chapter 5, we have Deborah singing. This is first of all, it's poetry. The nature of poetry is that it can be very, the point of poetry is not to relate facts, but to relate feelings, to relate impressions. And so you have here, both in the way it's written, it's very poetic language, it's very lengthy. You'll see that there are things that are emphasized, and not just emphasized, but Deborah is there to create a picture for you. She doesn't just want to say, and here came the army and defeated the bad guys. You know, it doesn't take you long to say that. She wants to paint the picture, and her purpose, or at least the main purpose of her painting this picture, it is a song. It is a song of praise to God. Okay, so first of all, before we actually start reading it, I want to remember two other very, very famous songs that we have seen, because there's a little bit of similarity to a certain degree. First of all, the Song of Moses, which is in Exodus 15, which of course is Moses's response to the incredible miracle of the Exodus from Egypt and the parting of the Red Sea. For those of you who were with us, I don't know, when we were doing Torah portions, and again, actually in Joshua, when we were talking about, we were studying chapter 2 in Joshua, and we talked about Rahab. We noted how some of the things Rahab said were in many ways a reference or quote from the Song of Moses. So we did kind of looked at that a little bit. And in Deuteronomy, there's another Song of Moses, the end, where it's not at all a song of praise. That's not the point. This is chapter 32. Chapter 32 is all a poem or a song. In Hebrew, poem and song are basically the same word, so I use them interchangeably. And in ancient times, by the way, it is assumed that poems were sung, which is why, you know, they're recited. Nobody read poetry. It was recited or chanted out loud. And therefore, when you say song or poetry, keep in mind that it really is the same thing in ancient times. So chapter 32 is also a song. It's written poetically, but it is not a song of praise. It is actually Moses taking his one of his final speeches to the nation, giving them, recapping their history, giving them a certain prophetic vision to the future, but doing it in the form of poetry. So the only thing that I'm taking from that song, because it really is a different song altogether, different format, different structure, different language, but that song begins with the words in Hebrew, Ha'azinu ashamayim va'adabera. Listen, O heavens, and I will speak. And then it goes on to the next word, Vatishma ha'aretz in Imrei Pi, the land will hear the words of my mouth. The first word of chapter 32 in Hebrew, ha'azinu, it means to listen or to hear, and it is a word that you find much less often than the second word there, vatishma, which also in modern Hebrew today, shama is the word we will use for hearing or listening. When I would say ha'azinu, that word is usually seen as a more poetic version of listen. And here in this song itself, we have that same word being used in verse 3. Hear, O kings, listen, counts or princes. So again, we have the parallel between the two types of listening, but this word ha'azinu, I just take from that the idea that it is a very poetic way of talking. Now, as we'll start reading the song now, the poem, but I think there's a lot more similarity with the Song of the Sea, or Moses's first song, not so much in the language, but in the picture it's painting. So let's start. On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang. Now, typically, when you have somebody mentioned first, here's two people singing, but if you have two people, generally it's assumed that the first one is the leader. And I'll remind you that in Exodus 15, it also says, then Moses and the children of Israel sang, and it was clearly Moses who was singing. Some people will say that Moses would recite one line, and then the children of Israel will repeat after him to join him in the song. And here we have Deborah and Barak. Again, it's clearly Deborah who's taking the lead. She is singing. It's from her perspective, but Barak is either repeating after her or chanting alongside her. Okay. Verse 2. This in my English, it said, when locks go untrimmed in Israel, which made no sense to me. I have no idea what that means, but it makes much more sense to translate it as when there were terrible disturbances in Israel. Okay, terrible disturbances in Israel when the nation volunteered, bless God. And we're going to have this back and forth now a few different times. We're going to see that there were problems. Okay, so that's when there were problems in Israel. Okay, when there were disturbances, and afterwards we're going to see what that is. But now in verse 3, she goes back to this declarative kind of thing. Hear, O kings, give ear, you princes. I will sing. Okay, I will sing to the Lord. I will again sing to the Lord, the God of Israel. So we have this idea of declaring the song, which is very much a part of how these songs go. There's something special about a song. It's praising God, but it's coming from a very deep emotion. Okay, and that's the function here of this idea of a song. Verse 4, O Lord, when you came forth from Seir, advanced from the country of Edom. Edom and Seir are really the same place. It's south of Israel. It was the territory of Edom. So it's as if God now has come out of the south, okay, coming to the north. Now we know that this whole war took place in the north. So she's painting a figurative picture of God coming from somewhere else to rescue them in the north, okay? The earth trembled, the heavens dripped, yea, the clouds dripped water, the mountains quaked before the Lord, him of Sinai, before the Lord, God of Israel. So first of all, pay attention to, we have two main images here. One is the earth shaking, and another is water. There's a lot of water all over the place, and we're going to see a lot more war later. And it reminds me in many ways, again, setting the scene, the images are similar to the Song of the Sea, because in the Song of the Sea, Moses is talking about the parting of the Red Sea and the flooding and, the drowning of on the one hand, the water standing still like a pillar. On the other hand, the drowning of the Egyptians. And here we have this beginning, even here before we get to the story of what happened with the water, we have so much water here. The heavens dripped and the clouds dripped water and the quaking. We have two different images that are basically the response of the earth itself to the fact that God has come to help us. So here she's also setting the stage. There's just been a military victory, but she's going to paint it completely as God's doing. Okay. And so she's talking about the approach of God as a savior, and the world itself, the earth itself, is going to respond to that. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anat, in the days of Yael, caravans ceased, and where wayfarers went by roundabout paths. Deliverance ceased in Israel, till you arose, O Deborah, arose, O mother in Israel. So first of all, the beginning of this is describing a time of great difficulty. Now, when we went to the beginning of chapter 4, all we know, okay, is that the nation did sinned, and God surrender them or put them in the hands of Yavin, the king of Canaan, okay, and his general Sisera, and then the nation of Israel cried to God. We have one king, one army that is oppressing the nation of Israel. Here, however, we have something much more extensive. She mentions in the days of Shamgar. Now we learn about Shamgar at the very end of chapter 3, and as we noted then, Shamgar's enemy was not Canaanites, it was Philistines. And from what we can see, what we know about Shamgar is one verse. He had a one-time encounter with Philistines, slew 600 of them, and helped Israel, okay? She's going back now, and she's painting a picture that goes way beyond this particular battle with this one king, one Canaanite king, okay? She's creating a situation where there was an overall problem, okay? She's talking about caravan seas, wayfarers went by roundabout paths, deliverance ceased. In other words, people's daily lives were interrupted on a regular basis. They were being attacked on the roads. So this is going way beyond what one king would have been doing in one area of Israel. She's talking about something far broader. But then she says something that some of the commentaries note with a bit of unease. Till you arose, or until, actually, I translate different, until I arose. In Hebrew, it's till I arose. I'm not sure why it says you. Until I arose, O Deborah, arose, O mother of Israel. Sounds a little arrogant, wouldn't you say? Everything was going bad, problems left, right, and center, but then I came and saved everything. Now, there is a commentary very well known, Rashi, who reads this and says this was a failing of hers, okay? That there was a pause here, an arrogant slip, shall we say, that was problematic, and he picks it up later on in the poem that we'll see. Okay, when they chose new gods, was there a fighter then in the gates? Okay, no shield or spear was seen among 40,000 of Israel. Again, she's going back to talk about how this was a terrible time, and there was no rescue, there was no army, there was no nothing. And then she brings herself into this again, but in a very nice way. My heart is with Israel's leaders, with the dedication of the people, the dedicated, or as we translated, the volunteers of the people, bless the Lord. So she now puts herself, she came down a bit from her arrogance and puts herself with the nation who is suffering and says, my heart is with them, and thank God, okay? And now she goes to a place where she's going to talk about how unbelievable God is. You riders on tawny she-asses, you who sit on saddle rugs, and you wayfarers, declare it. She's turning to all the people in Israel, who, especially keep in mind, she's talking about these travelers. Just before, she talked about how the travelers were disturbed. They didn't have the ability to travel because they had the oppression. Now we're talking about all you travelers that are going to be able to do it, go back again. Remember how it is that your lives were able to go back to normal. You wayfarers, declare it louder than the sound of archers. There among the watering places, let them chant the gracious acts of the Lord. What are the watering places? I think here of the picture we always have at the well, Jacob meeting Rachel at the well, and other pictures over time at the well. This is where people gathered. Rebecca was at the well. These are where people gathered and where gossip is spread. And so she's talking on the one hand of the travelers who go from place to place, and then she says, as the different people gather to water their sheep, this is where they exchange gossip. What should they be talking about? Let them chant the gracious acts of the Lord, his gracious deliverance of Israel. He's using all these people to say, go out and spread the word so that everybody will realize how wonderful this deliverance was. Then did the people of the Lord march down to the gates. Okay, now they're getting ready to go to war. She's painted this picture. Awake, awake, O Deborah, awake, awake, strike up the chants. Arise, O Barak, take your captives, O son of Abinoam. Now, what this sounds like is basically she's when she starts with, then did the people of the Lord march down to the gates, awake, awake, O Deborah. It seems at first glance that what she's basically describing is how they got going. Okay, the nation came together. She was awoken in order to give her prophecy to Barak, get moving. Barak gets moving, and then she's talking about how that happened. But there's this one commentary who connects this verse, awake, awake, O Deborah, with her little arrogant slip that we saw in verse 7. And basically she said, for a moment there, he sees this whole song as a prophetic song, that God is giving her the vision, he's giving her the ability to express this. And so he's saying that when she uttered this arrogant message, she started slipping in her prophecy, realizing that she needed to regain it. She says, awake, awake, O Deborah, awake, awake, strike up the chant. And in this way realizes she's got to get back on course. Now you could say you like that interpretation, you don't, but I think it's very interesting. And I think it's particularly interesting in what it points out about that little bit of arrogance we see in verse 7. Okay. Then was the remnant made victor over the mighty. The Lord's people won my victory over the warriors. And this is a very common theme throughout the Bible and throughout Jewish history. The weak, who are the small, who are able to stand up against the mighty and the warriors with God's help. And so we have this here as well. From Ephraim came they whose roots are in Amalek, and we just explained that last week. Ephraim is certainly not from Amalek, but this meaning that Ephraim, whose roots are in their battle against Amalek. And we refer to Joshua, who fought the first battle of the nation of Israel right after the parting of the Red Sea, when they fought against Amalek. After you, your king Benjamin from Machir, which is Manasseh, came down leaders from Zebulun, such as Holda's marshal staff, and Issachar's chiefs were with Deborah. As Barak, so was Issachar, rushing after him into the valley. So here, we talked about the book of Judges. We started and we talked about what is a judge, and a judge, we said, can be understood in the context of this book, not only as a judge, but as a leader. And then when we started with Deborah, and Deborah was introduced to us as a judge, okay, which is not just as a judge, but as someone who judged, okay. It talks that she judged Israel, which was a unique way of putting it. The other judges are referred to as saviors or leaders. Here she's talked about as a judge, and we saw at the beginning when she's introduced that that's really what she did. She sat in judgment. She was like a court judge. People came and she helped them resolve their disputes. In this section of the song, Deborah is a judge in a different way. She is judging the nation. She is saying, here you did good, here you did bad. And so here she gives enormous praise for those people who joined the battle. But then she mocks and criticizes terribly those who didn't join. Among the clans of Reuben were great decisions of heart. She's mocking them. Oh, you had to sit and think about it so long. What'd you have to think about it so long? There's a war going on. Get out and join your brothers. But she has tremendous criticism here, which she says with deep sarcasm. Why then did you stay among the sheepfolds and listen as they pipe for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben were great searchings of heart. Gilead tarried beyond the Jordan. And Dan, why did he linger by the ships? Asher remained at the seacoast and tarried at his landings. So these are the tribes that she's criticizing because they did not join. They had better things to do. They're too busy with their business interests. Zebulun is the people that mocked to death, Naphtali on the open heights. She praises these two tribes for their amazing bravery. They mocked death. They were brave. They faced death. They didn't care. They just knew they had to get the job done. And now she goes to what happened in the battle itself. Then the kings came. They fought. The kings of Canaan fought at Taanach by Megiddo's waters. They got no spoil of silver. The stars fought from heaven. From their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away. The raging torrent, the torrent Kishon. March on, my soul, with courage. Then the horses' hoofs pounded as headlong galloped the steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord, bitterly curse its inhabitants, because they came not to the aid of the Lord, among the warriors. Okay, so basically what we're saying here is that well, she goes back afterwards to cursing those people who did not come to the aid of the Lord, who did not participate in the fight. But before then, she is using many words, a great deal of information to describe the battle. Let's just compare it to chapter 4. This is the total description of the battle in chapter 4. It's verse 13. So Sisera ordered all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the troops he had to move from Charoshet, going to the Vadi Kishon. Okay. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Up, this is the day in which the Lord will deliver Sisera into your hands. The Lord is marching before you." Barak charged down Mount Tabor, followed by 10,000 men, and the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and army into a panic before the onslaught of Barak. That's it. That's all that's written. And there's no detail, and we don't understand how it happened. We just know that there's this army from this direction, Barak's army from that direction. God did something to confuse everybody, and that was the end of it. Barak charged and won. The rest of the story, which is in great detail, is about Sisera running away to Yael. But here we have much more detail as we go into this idea of what happened, the waters, obviously the waters. So first we have something about waters. The torrent Kishon swept them away, the raging torrent, the torrent Kishon, okay? And of course, this, and the horses hooves pounded, a headlong gallop the steeds. We have here the description, of course, all ascribed to God. God brought this amazing storm, unleashed the waters of heavens, okay, which then came down on the Kishon River, and that was it. They mired them in the mud, and so we have this incredible description of how this all happens. And then we move to Sisera, and of course she thinks Yael is the most amazing person, blesses her. Most blessed of women be Yael, wife of Hever the Kenite, most blessed of women in tents. He asked for water, she offered milk. In a princely bowl, she brought him curds. Now, this princely bowl is something that it is an actual kind. It was like a victory cup, and a general who was going to be victorious when he came back to his country, to his home base, to his king, he would be presented with this victory cup as a token of appreciation. So here again, using irony, in this victory cup, he's running away from the battle, and she gives him milk in a victory cup, okay, in this princely bowl, this victory cup, of course, which is the instrument of his death and ultimate complete downfall. Again, she's using that irony. Her left hand reached for the tent pin, her right for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, crushed his head, smashed and pierced his temple. Very bloody, very, at her feet he sank, lay outstretched, at her feet he laid still. There he sank, there he lay, destroyed. And I think here, if we look at this, we're going to see move on to the next one in a minute. But what, at the very beginning, what did Deborah say to Barak when she was trying to get him moving? And he was very, very hesitant. And finally, she said to him that delivery will be in the hands of a woman. And if you look at this song of Deborah's, Deborah talks about, of course, the victory of God. Even the incredible victory of Barak against Sisera is completely talked about. We don't know about the army of Barak. No mention of the army here, okay? The only thing that's mentioned is God's bringing the rain, and the rain trapping the army of Sisera. So from Deborah's perspective, the men were irrelevant, okay? The armies were irrelevant. There's God as the supreme hero, and there are three women, and it's via these three women that the story is being told. The first woman is Deborah, of course. She's the leader. She's the one who spurs Barak on, who ensures that he does this, and then she's the one that tells the tale. It is her perspective that will be the important perspective here. She's going to be telling how amazing the victory was. It wasn't a victory of men, it was a victory of God. And then she goes to Yael, who of course kind of seals the victory, and that she was the one who killed Sisera. And she talks so much, she gives such detailed description, very gruesome description, but really basically credits her for all that has happened here. And she, of course, is a hero of course, in both stories, but here again with that amazing most blessed of women, intense. And I love that, because women intense is women who are not soldiers. These are women who are not the people who usually affect a battle. And yet a woman intense, this woman who usually her world is about looking for her family and caring for her tents, her family, she then becomes this amazing hero. And then we have the last woman. And I think the way she uses Sisera's mother, I think, is really brilliant and kind of bringing home the irony and the victory here. Through the window peered, in other words, instead of just saying Sisera's dead, the end of the story that we have in chapter 4 is very dry. Sisera's dead, Yavin is vanquished, all is good. Okay, here we have a bloody version of Sisera dead. Okay, and now we have Sisera's mother, who we don't know anything about. I don't know if she knows anything about Sisera's mother. Maybe she's imagining it, but what she's trying to create is, now let's see what happens on the other side. Until now, we've been talking about how we feel great and how we're praising God for bringing us back to normal life, for defeating our enemies. And now she's saying the other side, these are the losers. Through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice she whined, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why so late the clatter of his wheels? Through this description, we see that the assumption of everybody's point is that he's going to come back a victor. You remember that princely bowl, or that cup of victors. Okay, they're standing there with the cup of victors, which of course Deborah turned around and had it be the thing that Yael fed the milk to Sisera in, as the vehicle for his downfall. But you can picture her here waiting, Sisera's mother, with all these women who surround her, waiting, the women who are waiting for the great generals, the soldiers, the heroes to come back. Okay, and now she's wondering why it's taking so long. So there's a little bit of doubt creeping in here. The wisest of her ladies give answer. She too replies to herself, they must be dividing the spoils they have found. A damsel or two for each man. Spoil of dyed cloths for Sisera. Spoil of embroidered cloths. A couple of embroidered cloths round every neck is spoil. Look how many times she talks about spoils and cloths. They cannot believe. In other words, they're describing themselves. They are so confident, and they so, the picture that Deborah paints of what does a victory look like, spoils. The general comes back and he's got gold and silver and women, and here are their women waiting for them. And that's how it ends. We know that we can picture. In other words, she sets this up in this way. She doesn't then say, okay, and he never came home, so they were disappointed. Because that's not the point. We know what happened. But I think it's a way of it just escalating the amazing miracle and how wonderful it was to take these women. In other words, she has Israel she starts the beginning of the poem, Israel's down in the dregs. Israel can't even travel on the roads. Everyone's so depressed. So daily life is so affected. And yet on the other hand, you've got these victors, you've got these generals, and it's represented by Sisera's mother and all the women, that they're waiting there for the spoils and the riches to come back. And of course, everything switches. Israel is on top. They're the victors, and it's thanks to God who they praise. And these women who we just met, now that we know they're at the bottom. These men are not coming back. They're stuck in the river of Kishon, and that's the end of them. So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may his friends be as the sun rising in might. It's very, very clear. Deborah is basically drawing the line. You're either with God or you're against God. If you're against God, you may think you're great. You may think you're going to win, but you're just going to end up being slaughtered to the ground. And the land was tranquil for 40 years. Now, 40 years, we're going to see with every judge, 40 years is a complete time. We see 40 in different ways throughout the Bible. Moses goes up to Mount Sinai each time for 40 days and 40 nights. The spies are going to tour the land for 40 days. 40 is always a typological number that refers to a complete and whole time, a good time. If things were really superb, then we have 80 days, and we have we have after Ehud ben Gera, we saw that in chapter 3, everything was good for 80 years, excuse me, not days, 80 years. And that is an expression of unbelievable success and quiet. In the case of Deborah, while her song is amazing and the victory is amazing, it is a standard period. It's 40 years. It's different from Ehud ben Gera, but of course it's still good. There's a good time, 40 years, and afterwards we're going to see that we don't have 40 years either, always. That's it. We have finished Deborah. Anybody have comments or questions?
I think we need a whole hour for that. That like covered so much. I mean, it just gives like so much more detail to what was in the chapter before that you miss it. I mean, I don't think that I've ever understood that it was there. So that's amazing. Thank you, Sondra.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you know, but go back and read it because, you know, I did it fast because we'd already taken bits and pieces from this to fill in the story. But I just, you need to see it as it is. This is the perspective of Deborah.
Right. Hear the whole song front to back. No, it's amazing. And that God is on their side.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I don't think I've ever known that whole, you know, that she gave him milk. I don't think I've ever even read that. Or I've read it, but I never saw that she gave it to him in a victory cup, you know, like here's your milk, sister.
And you know what? It doesn't even necessarily mean that she had a victory cup. I'm sure she didn't have a victory cup. But Deborah is using this as an irony because, you know, even when Sisera comes into his tent, he knows he's defeated already. He's running away from the battle. But he's going to, he thinks, is someone who's going to honor him. And so when she brings him the milk, she's assuming she's honoring him when indeed she's about to kill him, you know. So I think Deborah plays with that irony as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to give you all the credit, Sondra. It was very interesting, and you're very excited about the whole thing, and it came from your excitement to our excitement. It's very nice.
Thank you, Ruchama. It's good to see you.
And by the way, the whole Torah is called Shirah.
Right. At the end of Deuteronomy. At the end of Deuteronomy, when Moses, one of the times when he's summing up, you know, what it is, he talks about the song. But there's also a question, is he talking about the whole Torah, or is he just talking about that song, you know, it's the song of chapter 32? I don't know. But, you know, the thing is that it is, song is something different. Poetry is different. You cannot express in prose things to the extent that you can express with the emotion and the use of language and irony and all these different figures of speech that you have in poetry. It's a whole different.
Right, exactly outlet. Like music.
Exactly.
You cannot express what music expresses with words.
Exactly. It takes you to a different dimension. Good. All right. Well, everybody, have a great day. Yes, wait, Lynn, you have a question?
What will we be doing next week? I like to read in advance.
No, we're going to go on to chapter 6.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now chapter 6, we begin Gideon. But Gideon, you know.
So how did Deborah die? Do we know?
We don't know. No, she died of natural causes. There was no, you know, we don't know that. As most judges, we don't know they died. And we do some of them, but most of them we don't. We just know they lived, they ruled, whatever, and then they died. But
well, she
Gideon
was
begins in chapter 6, and Gideon is actually quite a number of chapters, and it has some very interesting stories. So we're gonna start digging into that next week. Thank you, Richard. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Sondra.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Hope to see you next week.
Thank
See you
you.
next week.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell. And that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you and have a wonderful day.